Developer Experience in Windows 11 with Kayla Cinnamon.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. The podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, which is a full-service software architecture and engineering firm that serves companies that are building mission-critical software systems using Microsoft technologies. Quick announcement, we are in the second year of my architect forums, and you can sign up for the next session. The link is in the show notes. It's a monthly forum. If you lead a .NET software team and you're looking to collaborate with other peer software architect leaders, then just sign up at the link in the show notes, and we'd love to have you. Also, by request, I'm also launching a new software leadership forum for technology executives who oversee software engineering groups. Those are CTOs, VPs of engineering, engineering directors, etc. So if you oversee software development in your company, but don't directly work in those teams, you oversee those teams, then this forum is for you. It'll focus on topics specific to management leadership for software engineering departments. And if you wish your boss was getting some professional development and think it would be useful, then tell your boss. We'd love to have him. So we'll include that link in the show notes, clearmeasure.com/developers/forums for both of them. And it'll be a split sign up. And for those who are looking for Programming with Palermo, my video podcast, you can just search for it in any of the directories and you'll be able to find it. Our guest today on the show is returning from 2019, Kayla Cinnamon, and she is a senior product manager at Microsoft working on the developer experience in Windows. And this includes Dev Home, PowerToys, and formerly she worked on Windows Terminal and Cascadia Code, which is the font that you all use inside Visual Studio. She holds a master's degree in information technology from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and also with a concentration in human-computer interaction. And she recently was a speaker at the recent Microsoft Build Conference, and we'll include a link to that in the show notes. But Kayla, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me back.
I'm good. You've been really busy, and you were a speaker at the recent Microsoft Build Conference. But since we had you on the show last, I think you, 5 or 6 years now at Microsoft, kind of moving around. How's the journey been?
Oh, it's been great. I've been on the same team actually since I joined, and I just kind of started working on broader and broader things. So still developer experiences, started on Windows Terminal, and now I'm kind of focusing on the whole of Windows, especially with Dev Home.
Nice. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out of your group. So let's kind of go back and then go forward, because I think it'd be good for everybody to understand. So you worked on Windows Terminal and Cascadia Code. Those are kind of past projects. Now, we kind of take it for granted that there's cool fonts available to use, but what does it mean to develop a font? How do you even do that?
Well, luckily we had some really great font designers to work with, and they helped shape the letter forms as well as create the code and the way that those letter forms come to life. So a lot of the work that I did was helping design how it looked and then how it felt in Terminal 2, and then all of the product manager pieces of it with marketing and make sure the GitHub repo is all set up and all that stuff. But yeah, it was really cool. I don't think I'll have the chance to do that again, but yeah, it was really cool to be able to work on that.
Nice. And then also Windows Terminal, it was a big splash when it came out and kind of replaced just the regular console. Is that an ongoing project that's continuing to go, or was it just a big conversion and now it's done? How does that lay?
Yeah. So we still have a team dedicated to it, and there's a new PM on it now. His name's Christopher. And they're still getting features out. And they also recently came out with Windows Terminal Canary, which is an even more insider or like testing build that you can sign up for. So they're getting more and more features out and experimenting a bit more too, with the 3 different builds of Terminal being Canary Preview and then the one that comes shipped in Windows, which is the stable version. But yeah, they're still coming out with new stuff. And I think releases are not as frequent because when we first started, we had a lot of things we wanted to get in there, but they're still working on some really cool stuff.
Okay. Nice. So at Build, there was quite a bit to talk about. I'd like to review because I think the listeners, there's probably a good number of listeners that are not up to speed with all of the cool things that are built into Windows for developers. In your opinion, what's the most exciting to start with?
Ooh, you're going to make me pick my favorite child.
Or I can pick.
I think for things that come with Windows, I think Dev Home is really interesting and exciting. And it's a new surface that we have been working on, and we announced it at Build last year. And it's somewhere that we wanted to give developers a place where they can be productive and have a lot of their developer tooling all in one place on Windows. So that's kind of where the name Dev Home came from. And it's really helpful for getting your machine set up. There's a machine configuration tool in it that helps you install apps, clone repos, run WinGet configuration files, and just get your machine set up. And then we've added environments, Windows customization, and utilities this year at Build just to give more content and helpful tooling in Dev Home. And I can dive into those features as well. But our goal is for it to be a playground and a place for developers to have a lot of their tooling that would be helpful delivered right in Windows, so it's there without needing any installation.
And this is completely separate from Visual Studio.
Right. Yeah. And it's meant to be like a Windows companion. So it's meant to bring the developer experiences to Windows and then also give you agency over your machine and the ability to customize Windows just how you like it as well.
What does that mean, agency over your machine?
So one example is the Windows customization feature that we've delivered. And as we know, developers love to tweak little settings in Windows to make it act just like they want it to. And one way that they do it is through scripting and writing scripts and then running them and flipping registry keys and things like that. So we wanted to provide a user-friendly way of exposing those sorts of features so that you don't need to script necessarily. You could just go into Windows customization and toggle those less hidden settings or more hidden settings, I'll say, in one place in Dev Home. So that's kind of what we mean when we say agency. We want it to be easy to get the machine that into the state that you want, especially if you care about your hardware, you want to care about your software, and that's one way of doing it.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's helping you get to existing Windows settings more easily, or does it also add additional settings?
It adds settings that have been hidden or are just registry keys that don't have like a UI setting is the goal. And the first wave of things we've added is some File Explorer settings, because in the latest rejuvenation of File Explorer, they hid a lot of those settings away, so then they're harder to find. So we're making them easier to access. And then in our next and future iterations, we want to start bringing those registry key toggles into the forefront as well.
Okay. One of the things that jumped out at me in Dev Home was setting up an environment and a WinGet configuration file.
Yeah.
And is this meant to be where if I go to a different machine, clone a repository, and now there's a few things that just have to be installed on that machine in order to build it? Is that the scenario that it's going for?
That's one of them. Okay. Yeah. So for the one that you've mentioned, if a repository has a WinGet configuration file with it, so we have them all for our repositories that we work on, so like Terminal, Dev Home, PowerToys, they all come with them. Dev Home will be able to detect that configuration file when you've cloned and say, hey, there's a config file. Would you like to run it? And also view it so you know what it's going to do. And then the WinGet DSC file says, okay, I need this tooling with these versions and these dependencies, et cetera. Make sure they're on the machine. If they are on the machine, great. Don't install it a second time. If it's not on the machine, then install it in get everything set up so that it's in your desired state. So that's kind of where DSC or desired state configuration comes from.
Okay, that's really cool. Now,
Yeah.
so desired state configuration has been around for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
but we never really associated it with developer workstation setup. But every developer has this problem, whether it's something as simple as, hey, I need to have, I don't know, a machine needs to have something as simple as SQL Server Express or whatever tool it happens to be. There's always something that just has to be installed, and either we remember that it has to be installed, or the bill fails with an error message. Oh, you forgot to install such and such. And we're always looking for the holy grail of clone and immediately run. And so this is closing that gap. How do we generate these files? Is there a designer? What's the experience there?
So DevHome is actually a great tool for that. And this is a feature we just released with the build release last month, where you can go in and select repositories you want to clone, and then also applications you want to install. And then at the end of the flow, you can click generate configuration file. And then that will take all of your requirements that you've just selected, put it into the YAML file that is the WinGet configuration, and you could save that. And then you can go replicate it and run it on any machine that you need. And you should be up and running with just that file, which is great. And then there's also a lot of docs on the learn.microsoft.com site of how to get these files set up and like what the parameters are and that sort of thing. But DevHome is a great UI way of doing it, because you can just shopping cart, pick everything you need, and then hit go, and then it makes the file for you, which is cool.
Okay. Now, does DevHome, it can't possibly know about every dependency that I might need. So how do we bridge the gap with, hey, it needs this 20-year-old, I don't know, exe that does some old encryption that my company still requires?
Yeah, I think some of that will have to be hand done after the fact, but I think DevHome will help you get most of the way there, especially with figuring out the syntax and just replicating it for those sorts of things that are a little bit more obscure. But yeah, I think it's a great stepping stone, and it's fairly fresh in terms of things that have come from our team. So we're actively working on improving it too.
Nice. This is really cool, and I'll admit I haven't used it in this way before, but I'm going to, because there's always something, the last mile in just the ability to clone a repository on a new machine and immediately build, run, and start working on that piece of software.
Yeah, exactly.
Closes that gap.
We used it quite a bit for our build demo prep also, because we had like 2 or 3 machines for backups and all that stuff. So we'd run it and say, make sure this is uninstalled, make sure this is installed, make sure these repos are here or they're not here, that sort of thing. Because one of the demos I did, I had to install Git on stage. And then every time we ran it, I have to go uninstall Git. But I just run the DSC file, and then it makes sure everything's in the proper state, and then I can go again, which is really handy. So yeah, they've been pretty cool.
Nice. And for the listeners who might think, why do I need that? I already have that experience. That if all you're using is just ASP.NET, everything's .NET, everything's modern, yeah, you might not have anything extra, but I think we're about to start getting into that realm with the ARM PCs, because now if we've been living in x64 for years and that's it, and now we're going to ARM, there's these little things that we're going to have to compile just until things get ironed out. Like Adobe is in this realm where I think Illustrator doesn't yet work on Copilot PC with ARM yet, but Photoshop does. And they're having to figure out their build stuff. And so things like DevHome would probably be good for their developers, because they need to, have extra tools installed.
Yeah. And the last thing that DSC can do is it can toggle Windows settings also. So if you have a new machine and you want to in dark theme with seconds in the clock and that sort of thing, you can have that in this file too. So it isn't just cloning and installing, it's also configuring, which is cool.
Nice. So if I run the build, does running the build invoke WinGet in this scenario? How does it start and apply? Because if I've got repo A, which has a WinGet DSC file with, dark mode on, and then repo B that has the same thing with dark mode off, what happens to cause those to toggle and override each other?
Yeah. So I think you can only run one configuration file at a time.
Okay.
So it depends on which ones you run first. If you're changing from like dark theme to light theme, for example. And in Dev Home, it will detect each separate config file for the repositories that you're cloning. So it wouldn't run them all automatically at once. You would have to do it by hand.
But what's the action where, okay, I'm done with repo A. Now I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to work on this other repo now. And so, it has a different setting. So what do I have to do something? Do I have to click on something to put my machine in, the mode for this other repo?
Yeah. So assuming you have that repo cloned already, you can run WinGet configure and then that file, that YAML file that's associated with that repo, and then it'll go and apply the settings and make sure all those things are installed. It won't reinstall the set. Like if you've switched back and forth, it won't install again. It just makes sure it's there.
So it sounds like the private build script for that repo needs to run the command line WinGet configure.
Yes. Or you can use the UI of Dev Home to run it, and you can select it with the file picker and hit run, and it'll do it there too.
Sure. Very cool. Very cool. Now, I have used Dev Drive. Is that part of Dev Home or a separate thing?
So Dev Drive is a Windows feature, and Dev Home makes it easier to use, but they are separate entities. And Dev Drive, for those who don't know, is the new file system drive that we've delivered to help enhance performance for developer scenarios. So it runs on REFS, which is the resilient file system, compared to C drive, which is on NTFS. And it also has limited filter drivers as well, so that when you're running processes specifically with like IO scenarios, they're a whole lot faster when they're in a dev drive. And making a dev drive can be done through Windows settings, but you can also do it through Dev Home. Like when you're cloning your repositories, you could say, hey, make a dev drive too and clone them there. And then it's all done in one swoop, which is my preferred way, because there's a lot more settings and toggles that I don't need to know in Windows settings that you could do to make your dev drive just right. I just want a plain dev drive, make it for me with the defaults, and it usually works fine in Dev Home.
Okay. You said something that might change a lot. You said, when I'm cloning the repository, I like to set up a dev drive.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you like to put each cloned repository in a separate dev drive?
Oh, no. So if I didn't, I still have one.
Okay.
Yeah. Having multiple doesn't give you extra juice or anything. It's all,
okay.
It just works the same as just having one.
Okay. Does it use up your RAM? Or you said resilient file system. So what exactly is going on? Where exactly is that data?
That is a great question. I am not an expert on Dev Drive, so that would be good to ask some of our other Dev Drive folks.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm not 100% sure on the inner workings of that.
I haven't heard the term resilient file system. Maybe I'm out of touch. That you can format drives as that instead of NTFS?
I want to say I think so, but I don't want to say something that's wrong.
Okay.
But I think REFS has been around for quite a long time. I just don't know how to personally set one up and that sort of thing. I just know that dev drives are automatically formatted that way.
I have anecdotally noticed that just running a build with some of our repositories is quite a bit faster in dev drive. So I can tell, hey, it works for us.
Yeah. No, it works, which is really cool. Especially cloning is really fast. And there was one time I was testing Dev Home and I was testing the clone feature, and I thought Dev Home broke because it was instant. Like I hit clone and then it went right to the summary page of okay, you've cloned. And I was like, Dev Home was broken. The cloning thing didn't work. Let me go see if the files are there. And sure enough, everything was cloned. It was just instant. So that caught me off guard. I didn't realize it was helpful for that scenario. But yeah, it's pretty quick, which is really nice.
Nice.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient. moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery. ClearMeasure is also happy to be a sponsor of the video podcast, Programming with Palermo. Watch, learn, and program alongside Chief Architect Jeffrey Palermo. Videos are added weekly and available on syndicated locations supporting video podcast or by visiting palermo.network. Tune in today.
Before we leave DevHome, is there another capability or feature that we shouldn't ignore?
I think environments is something that is really interesting that we've just released for build. And it helps bring your cloud and remote environments into a centralized place. So right now we support Hyper-V VMs and Microsoft Dev Boxes, and you can access all of them from this environments page rather than having to go into Hyper-V or go over into I think it's devbox.microsoft.com or something. You don't need to go navigate there. You could just have everything in one place and launch everything from DevHome. And you can also run that machine configuration thing of hey, install my apps, clone my repos, and point it at an environment. So you could do everything from your local machine and then configure those remote environments from here, which is cool.
Okay, so the remote environments are still remote. This is a configuration tool?
Yes. So it lets you configure them from your local PC, and then also is just a centralized place. So if you have a lot of VMs or a lot of dev boxes, you can access them really easily in one view. And then in the future, we're adding WSL here as well to manage your WSL distros. And then Windows Sandbox will be coming as well to the environments page. So we're trying to give you a one-stop shop for all of your remote places that you might want to be developing.
Okay. Are these optimized for VM environments or also cloud resource, Azure resources?
I want to say both, because the Microsoft DevBox is a cloud environment rather than a VM. Or do you mean something else?
Well, Azure DevBox is still a VM. It's still a Windows computer. I'm thinking Azure Container Apps or Azure SQL. Is that any intersection with those?
No.
No. Okay. So really VM based. Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Okay. Very cool. All right. Well, so we will include, easy to find DevHome. I'm guessing the easiest way is for people to type WinGet install DevHome.
Yeah. So DevHome comes inbox all the way down to Windows 10. So it should be there.
It's already there.
It should already be there. Yeah.
Very cool. Now is PowerToys, is that already there? Or do we have to install?
No.
Okay. So WinGet
That'd be
install
cool, though.
PowerToys.
Yeah, WinGet install PowerToys for sure.
Okay, cool. So you're also working on PowerToys. I use PowerToys, but I haven't even got around to even trying them all because there's so many. But which ones have been the most popular?
Most popular would be Fancy Zones, which gives you as many crazy window layouts as you want. So I know Windows comes with the regular quadrant snapping, or Windows 11 just added a few select templates that you could snap to. Fancy Zones lets you have any layout and lets you grid it in any kind of way that you'd like, so that you can have a very customized window layout, which is really nice. So that is the most popular PowerToy for sure. One of them that I really love is File Locksmith. And that helps you, when you let's say you try to delete a file and it says, oh, I can't delete, I'm in use by another process or something, but it doesn't tell you what it is, tell you how to unlock it or anything.
Yeah.
File Locksmith helps you free up that file so that you can then delete it, which is really nice. So that one's I feel like it's not as well known, but that one is really, really nice.
Yeah. Okay. That keeps you from having to restart your computer just to delete a file.
Yeah. And sometimes that doesn't even work. So you have to try it again. But yeah, File Locksmith is great. And then I personally like Color Picker, which you can open with Windows key Shift C. And because I do a lot of Figma design, my degree is in UI design. So being able to grab colors is a handy thing. And the just on the go color picker, I think is a great utility that I use all the time.
That is cool. It just pops up the little color code right by the mouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really handy.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I think one more. Well, I'll list one more and then I'll stop.
Okay.
The Find My Mouse utilities are great. I don't think they're on by default, but if you hit Control key twice, it'll highlight your mouse. So I have an ultra wide, and sometimes I can't find it. I can't find my mouse. So if I hit Control key twice, it'll do like a yellow circle around it, and help me find it, which is great.
It's on by default.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Because I haven't customized mine, and control.
Okay. Yeah. So that one's handy too. So yeah.
That is true. Yeah, when you have multiple monitors or a huge monitor, it gets lost. So,
yeah.
With the fancy zones, and you're your tech support for me. So Windows left and right, does it customize what those do into the fancy zones when you just do Windows left, right, up, down?
No, okay. They're separate. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Well, then that means I'm not missing anything.
Okay.
I was thinking, man, am I doing something wrong? Cool. All right. Now, in your talk at Build, you also talked about Windows subsystem for Linux. How does that intersect? Is that also in your team?
Yep. Yeah.
So what's the latest there?
So they have been working on a lot of enterprise functionality and adding like Intune integration so that you can have distros be marked as compliant or non-compliant, which is really great for that enterprise scenario. So they've been working on that quite a bit. And then they're also working on a settings UI for WSL settings. So you don't need to use the command line. You can have a nice UI for it. So that's a couple things they're working on. And then, of course, they're adding integration into the environments page of Dev Home, which was actually started by a community member. Someone made a repo and a PR to add WSL into environments. And now we just need to clean it up and get it in, which is really cool. So those are a few things. I know Craig Lowen, who is the product manager for WSL, he had a talk at Build as well, covering everything new with WSL. So that would be a great resource to check out too, for a lot more detail than what I could provide.
Sure.
But yeah.
Okay. As an aside, I want to make sure we finish with PowerToys, because what is there, like 50 or 30 PowerToys?
At least.
The host file editor, I'm glad actually has a tool now, because even just last week, I was going into system, drivers, etc., host, and just pulling it up in Notepad. Because, well, specifically, and I think developers still run into this, if you remote desktop to a computer that's not on the same Azure Active Directory or Microsoft Intro now, and it's not on the same, and you got to use the checkbox to use web service to log into remote desktop, it won't let you use the IP address, and you have to use a host name. Of course, you don't have a host name, so you have to fake a host name by going into your host file, give it a network name that maps to the IP address so that the remote desktop client is happy that it's using a host name. So that's one of those cycles where it's like, it still makes you do some host file magic.
Yeah. And actually, this reminds me, I'm going to hop back to Dev Home, but it's related. We added some PowerToys to Dev Home so that they ship Inbox and Windows, because Dev Home ships Inbox and Windows, and host file editor is one of them. So you can now get host file editor without needing to install PowerToys, even though PowerToys is great and you should. But that comes by default in Windows, which is great. And same with the registry preview utility and the environment variables editor we added as well. So you can get all those by default without having to install anything else.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, let me just read off a few for the listeners, because I think everyone will want to install it. Advanced paste, a paste as plain text by just doing Control-Alt-V. Always on top with Windows Control-D to just make a window always on top. Like you said, the environment variables editor, image resizer, peek, which I haven't tried, screen ruler to measure something on the screen, registry preview, mouse without borders. That's now built right in. Mouse without borders has been around for a long time, but now it's kind of bundled, as opposed to a standalone. So that's good. Crop and lock. Which I actually don't know what that is. Crop and lock. Crop and lock.
I think it's
Away.
yeah. Whenever I hear crop and lock, I think of the song or the dance move from like the early 2000s.
Oh, you mean pop it and lock it?
Yeah.
Pop and lock? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what it is. It's a more powerful snipping tool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very cool. Then you mentioned the color picker, fancy zones, mouse highlighter, power renaming files and folders from just right clicking. And then text extractor, convenient way to copy text from anywhere on the screen. And that's like an OCR, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's cool because I noticed Apple has baked that into the iPhone photos as well, where you can copy text from an iPhone photo. I'm not sure if it works on Android. So now on Windows, even if it's on anywhere on the screen, an image, you can OCR it straight to text. That's useful.
And snipping tool also just got OCR, so you could do it literally with the Windows snipping tool as well.
Very cool. All right. There's a whole lot here. You guys are busy.
Yeah. All right. So a little bit.
So here's the one that's not going to get you in trouble now. What's the next power toy?
Oh. Okay. Wait. I could say this because I demoed it at Build. So we're working on projects. I think the name is TBD, but we're calling it projects for now. But I started my Build talk with Charla. We started by clicking one item on the taskbar, and then it launched everything in the right place, all in one click, with a specific monitor layout and that sort of thing. So what projects does lets you take a snapshot of your screen in the way that it is, and then lets you select apps that you want in that specific window configuration. And you can also apply command line arguments and then save it. So then in that one click, you can just get right into your development flow or right into your writing flow or whatever, and have everything pop up at once. Cause I know I'm a creature of habit. I always have everything in the same place, but depending on what I'm doing, I move things around, but it's still the same place per topic or task.
Right.
So projects is really great for just helping me context switch and getting me into my zone a whole lot faster rather than doing the window drag thing and all that. So that is in a feature branch in PowerToys right now, but should be coming fairly soon as a new utility, which should be cool.
Is that going to be integrated into WinGet DSC or somehow in a text file that can go in the repository?
Under the hood, it saves the configuration as a JSON file. Okay. So I think it should be easily exportable and shareable that way if you wanted to do that.
And you can execute that JSON file to make your desktop that configuration?
Yeah, with the like PowerToys projects thing, you can have that file and then run it, and then it launches as a project.
Okay.
I haven't tried sharing them, so that would be a fun. It's still in the feature branch, so it's still very much under development, but that would be a good test for sure.
Is running it going to have a command line option?
Y'all
are still working on it. I know.
Yeah, I know it should though. That's a good.
Well, I'm just
make sure that's in there.
Well, any developers who are working on an application that is heavy in reading and writing from SQL Server, if they're for .NET, they're going to be using Entity Framework, so they're probably using Entity Framework Profiler or SQL Server Profiler, because you're always sniffing the data going back and forth to SQL Server, which is one or two extra windows besides Visual Studio, and you're always having to bring it up because you always want to be watching it when you're doing data-heavy development. And that right there would solve. You just pop open the repo, run the build, and then it puts everything the way you want it, including popping open those programs, putting the windows where they want to go. And that's huge. That's another, just removing the friction from the decision to let me work in this repo to now you're actually working.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also great for switching monitor layouts. So sometimes I'm only on my laptop, or sometimes I have my ultra wide and my laptop, or if I go into the office, that's a whole different setup. So that's handy too for having those as well. So the possibilities are fairly endless here.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm really excited for this one to come out.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, how can listeners kind of follow the work that you and your team are doing? What's the best way?
There's a few options. We post pretty frequently on X. So and sometimes we ask for opinions and feedback. So we do that quite a bit. Our GitHub repositories are a great place to keep an eye on as well. And then we've been publishing blogs on the Windows developer blog site. I just wrote one this past week for the DevHome 0.15 release. So those feature updates are there too. So there's a few options that way, I think would probably be best.
Okay. What's the X handle?
I post a lot, so that would be Cinnamon _MSFT.
Your personal one. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we don't have a like team one, but we repost each other and everything, and we're easy to find. So,
yeah. All right. So you are Cinnamon-MSFT on X. You're also that on GitHub.
Yeah, and it's underscore on X. I couldn't get them to be the same. I know it really bothers me.
We'll include those links in the show notes so people can get them if they're hard to find. So very cool. Well, Kayla, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast and kind of updating us on the Windows goodness for developers. That's lots of great work.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Oh, my pleasure indeed. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.